welcome to the House of ZK Radio, which is a focused podcast and media channel exploring everything ZK, zero knowledge.
Thank you so much to the Veridice team for the keynote presentation. Coming up next, we have a fireside chat with Andy, who is CSO at Horizen Labs.
Hi.
Yeah, hi, Andy. Thank you so much for being here
Thanks
today.
for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm wondering if we can first start off with a brief introduction about yourself and your role at Horizen.
Sure, okay. So I'm Andy. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Horizen. Been in this role since the beginning of this year. Before that, I had my own DeFi startup building kind of automation and execution tooling across different DeFi protocols. Before that, I was in Bitflyer, the Japanese Bitcoin exchange. And then, if we keep going back, I spent some time in finance, but originally like robotics and mechanical engineering. So I've done the kind of the tech and then the fin, and then sort of landed in fintech. I've been in crypto since about 2013.
Nice. So you've been here for quite some time already. And I'm curious to hear, because you are focusing more on the strategy part with Horizen, I'm very curious to hear if you see any kinds of current trends with how ZK projects are scaling nowadays, or what components are really crucial for ZK projects to become more mainstream, for more users to adopt it. And especially from Horizen's position, I know Horizen has a few different offerings, first with ZK Verify, and then also with your guys' L3. So just on top of that, how do you see Horizen also uniquely positioning itself within the ZK landscape?
Wow, okay, that's about 5 questions in one. I think I'll just take a step back and talk about where I see the kind of the vision for like the internet first, and then like how verifiability and ZK maybe fits into that. So I think many of you will probably agree with me that the internet in its current form is basically dying. I mean, I just went to like look up a recipe the other day, and like it was just bombarded with ads and videos sliding out of nowhere and cookie banners, and then you have to slide right to the bottom to actually get to the information I needed. So that's like all this like slop and like AI generated content. I was really like, it's nothing like the internet of 10 years ago. And then on the other thing I think that's going wrong is like there's just doubt everywhere. Like just the kind of the points of doubt that you experience that I think we've normalized. For instance, when you're booking a flight and the price like suddenly jumps up because you've like refreshed the page and you doubt whether that's fair. Or you're like on a hotel booking site and you're about to book a room and it says like, oh, only one room left. And then you sort of, doubting if that's really true. Or you might be doing some online poker and you like lose 27 hands in a row and you start to doubt whether like the algorithm is actually like being randomly fair to you. So I just think the experience of the internet is like just going super downhill. And there's sort of two trends driving that. First of all, like the business model of the internet is still very much like traffic at any cost. So it's just leading us towards like rage baiting us into clicking on things, and we're getting like the same content generated over and over again, like and normalizing repetition. Maybe like instead of like 100 different blogs about the US midterms. Like that gets rewarded, whereas all the kind of the actual really interesting, unique content gets kind of downplayed. And I think like with the advent of blockchain and AI, we're going to see like 2 major shifts that kind of lead into the ZK stuff. So the first one is like the business, like with the rise of like AI, we're going to switch from like search engine to answer engine, right? You've all started using Google, and when you type in a search, you get like a Gemini summary at the top. It's like super useful. Like as that takes off, there's going to be no need to click down to like the 10 blue links and like go to other pages. So, that's going to really like when we start using answer engines instead of search engines, then the traffic currency disappears, the ad model revenue disappears, the ad revenue model disappears, and the way that we treat content will like completely change. So that's the first thing. The other thing is I think the infrastructure will completely invert. So when we talk, like, what do I mean by infrastructure inversion? So the classic example is like when you had the first cars appearing on the roads, like with horses. At the beginning, they were dealing with like cobbled streets, like cambering, like, and famously the boys wearing the red flags in front of the car. And the cars had to deal with like creaky old infrastructure before eventually the roads were like reinvented to be like flat and pristine and like designed for cars. And I think like pivoting now to like the ZK, I kind of feel like that's where we are now. I think as verifiability gets in more demand, it's going to start with demand coming from people who will like not settle for some of these points of doubt that I mentioned, whether it's like pricing unfairness, algorithm discrimination, and bias. So, but for us, it's kind of like a luxury, and we can afford to wait for the infrastructure to catch up, right? So as things develop, people will like slowly demand more verifiable experience. But for AI agents, it's all or nothing. You can't have like some things which are verifiable and some things which you have to trust any more than you can have an agent that has to wait to open a bank account before it can start transacting online. So, you know, the new technology for now is kind of forced into the old infrastructure, but like soon enough, the whole stack will need to invert, and then the old technology will come into the new verifiable infrastructure. And so there's going to be a ton of proofs coming from that. Proofs at every interface, whether it's proofs of like ID, proofs of reputation, proofs of capabilities of these agents. And verifiability is very important. Verification is very important. There's like so many smart people I've met here. Everyone's talking about proof gen. There's like a lot of like really smart people working on proof gen, but at the end of the day, verification really matters. So like, you know, that's the sort of problem that we're focusing on right now with ZK Verify.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned the real need for verification and all the steps that, say, an agent takes. And we can't have a scenario where it's like, oh, only half of its actions are being verified and the other half we're just going to trust. It needs to be fully verifiable. I'm curious to hear as well, especially when you mentioned the current state of the internet as you see it right now and all of the, say, AI slop that you've been seeing. I'm wondering if we can also tie this to content authentication, and which was a major topic in some of our previous panels from earlier today. Wanted to hear your perspective as well on just using ZK or any other kinds of verifiability mechanisms to authenticate the content that we see. Any other kinds of use cases for verifiability in addition to these agents?
Sure. Yeah, the content thing is really interesting because, like I said, right now, all of the algos are optimizing for like sort of popular mainstream content. And, you know, if you're somebody that's writing about, I don't know, like best pizza restaurants in Anchorage, Alaska, right, you're not really getting monetized for that. You're not really getting rewarded. And, you know, the incentives are much more geared towards let's just write, you know, yet another blog post about the midterms. Whereas if that business model changes and it's no longer about traffic, but more about like uniqueness of data for these LLMs, uniqueness of data goes from being like a fringe topic to like something that really has a premium. And it might be that if you had the choice between which LLM to subscribe to, you would rather have the one that has like more unique, more sort of fringe data because it's going to give you like a richer answer. So suddenly, you know, the person writing about pizza restaurants in Anchorage, Alaska, like has like a much more monetary premium on their content. Now, when publishers realize this, I think there's going to be a swift and hard pushback against like free scraping of these algorithms, and you know, it's going to be the model's going to switch completely from like revenue for eyeballs to like revenue for uniqueness of data. So I think a lot of this data is going to go dark, and a lot of it is going to be sort of verifiable as in terms of this was like authentically written by a real person and it's true about these like fringe topics. And you know, the AI companies are going to become like these sort of their dominion is going to now be paying for this content and not just like getting it for free. So uniqueness and like verifiability of fringe and useful sort of localized content will become a real shift.
Do you have any thoughts on how we can go about with democratizing compute, or say democratizing the proofs that can be generated. So if we were to say have a proof be attached to any sort of action that needs to be verifiable, how can we ensure that it's not just, say, a couple of those big players who have complete control over what kinds of proofs get generated for what scenarios? Do you have any thoughts on how we can maybe envision ourselves in a more democratized setting in the future?
Yeah, super interesting question. I think the funny thing about AI is it's kind of like quite a centralizing force. It's sort of maybe like the incentives are there, the efficiency incentives are to like for everything to be centralized, whereas like we want things to be like decentralized, right? So in terms of was it content you were asking about?
Or like just democratizing compute. Or
Yes. So with compute, obviously, like right now, we're seeing a lot of sort of proven networks like ZK proof generator is like being distributed. We've got like loads of deep in projects doing like deep in networking, deep in storage, deep in compute. But right now, they're never going to be quite as compelling, as competitive as like the giant data centers that these like hyperscalers are building. So like ideologically, we want like distributed and like provable, verifiable like other stacks. But it's hard to see how that will take off when Facebook can afford to build a brand new like nuclear power plant and co-locate it with massive data centers. So, but I think what will happen is, as AI demand continues to exceed the build out of these data centers, there will be a need for like sort of surplus. And at the same time, as we heard in a previous presentation, like trusting that if you like run an LLM query one day and the answer you get back is it seems like it came back too quickly and maybe the answer was a bit lower quality, but you're paying for like the pro subscription, like you start to doubt, are they feeding me the right model, or are they panicking because they've like hit peak demand of their data center and they're just like quietly filtering people into like the cheaper models? So yeah, I can see a situation where under these kind of spikes in load, the hyperscalers or these data centers will have the ability to sort of reroute to other sort of decentralized networks, whether it's compute or memory or indeed like verification and proof gen.
So we can anticipate more of like the rerouting for different types of options.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
And just as a last question before we end today's session, I'm also curious to hear if you have any kinds of thoughts on how verifiability will also be tied into privacy as well. And I know Horizen's focus, especially on the layer 3, is a privacy first or privacy centered design. So do you have any thoughts on how we can, say, balance privacy with verifiability in the next stage?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking to some guys from the Ethereum Foundation yesterday, and they were saying that they want to be neutral, right? They don't want to kind of have sort of half privacy, like privacy where you're not quite sure whether it's private or not, but at the same time they don't want it to be like cypherpunk, like everything is private, like, and there's nothing else you can do about it. So they want people to be able to like opt in to privacy if they need to for certain use cases, and I think that's a good model because it's compatible with like compliance and like other like sort of pragmatic use cases where you want to have privacy, but like selective privacy or like opt-in privacy. You want to be able to still like meet your obligations to the regulators. But people that do like have these kind of hybrid use cases, they do want to know if if they have indeed been enjoying privacy this time, or if you think something's private, then you do want to verify that your data hasn't actually been accessed, or it hasn't been shared, or it was private between this point and this point, but it was maybe this particular thing was shared. If we can verify that you're only sharing the things that you want to share and everything else is private, then I think that's really key for the industry to take off.
Yeah, absolutely. So anticipating more uses of selective disclosure, so users can opt in what kinds of data, say, they want to be revealed, or what they want to be kept private, while keeping a regulatory compliance
Exactly.
in check.
Yeah.
Got it.
And that's kind of what we're building with the new Horizen protocol.
Nice.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Andy, for this conversation. Really enjoyed this kind of macro level perspective that you have.
Great.
So
Thank you.
I appreciate you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.